The auctioneer's voice echoes across the estate sale lot in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It is October 1998, a Saturday morning. The kind where autumn light filters through bare oak branches and makes everything look older than it is. On table 17, between a set of Depression-era dishes and a wooden radio that hasn't worked since Eisenhower was president, sits a pair of shoes. They are not beautiful. The leather is cracked and darkened with age. The heels are unusually high, nearly 2 inches, compensating for something. The toes are shortened, cut back as if whoever wore them did not need the front portion of a shoe, custom-made, hand-stitched, built for feet that were no longer quite feet. A man in his 50s picks them up, turns them over. Inside the right shoe, tucked beneath a loose insole, he finds a small journal, leather-bound. The pages yellowed to the color of old bone. He opens it carefully. The handwriting is small, precise European. Written in German. He does not read German, but he recognizes the date on the first page. January the 15th, 1945, and he can read the English words someone translated underneath in pencil, probably decades later. The ink faded, but still legible. I should have died. Klaus died instead of me. Every step I take is his step. Every year I live is his year. The Americans gave me bacon when my mother was eating bark. I do not know if I was saved or cursed. The man buys the shoes for $12. The journal comes with them. 3 weeks later, the journal will be authenticated by a military historian at the National World War II Museum. The shoes will be donated, and the story will be verified through medical records, prisoner manifests, and a letter that had been sitting in an archive for 23 years, waiting to be found. But right now, in October 1998, the man simply holds the shoes and wonders what kind of feet would need them. The answer lies 53 years in the past, in a place that no longer exists, in a moment when winter tried to kill a boy and almost succeeded. Camp Hearn, Texas, January 1945. The transport truck pulls through the gates just after noon. It carries 32 prisoners of war, all German, all captured, during the collapse of the Ardennes offensive 3 weeks earlier. The temperature in Texas is 64 degrees, warm, almost pleasant. The kind of winter day that makes men from the frozen battlefields of Belgium think they have arrived in some kind of strange paradise. But inside the truck, there is a smell. Sergeant Marcus Webb notices it first. He is standing guard duty at the processing station, and when the truck doors open, the smell hits him before he sees the prisoners. It is not the usual smell of unwashed men, not sweat or mud or the sourness of bodies that have not bathed in weeks. This is something else, something deeper, something wrong. Webb does not know it yet, but what he is smelling is necrosis, dead tissue. The slow rot of flesh that is still attached to a living body. The prisoners climb down from the truck one by one. Most of them are thin, all of them are exhausted. Their uniforms are a mix of Wehrmacht, standard issue, and whatever they scavenged during the retreat. Some wear American field jackets taken from supply dumps. Some wear civilian coats. One wears a blanket tied around his shoulders like a cape. The last prisoner to step down is smaller than the rest, younger. He moves slowly, carefully, as if each step requires concentration. His name is Werner Steiner. He is 19 years old. He weighs 109 pounds. His hair is the color of straw that has been left too long in the rain. His eyes are grey, empty, the kind of empty that comes not from fear but from the complete exhaustion of feeling anything at all. He does not look at the guards, does not look at the other prisoners. He looks down at his feet and takes one step, then another. His gait is wrong, too stiff, too measured. Webb watches him walk, and something in his gut tightens. He has seen wounded men before. He has seen men walking on broken bones because they had no choice. But this is different. This boy is not limping. He is not favoring one leg over the other. He is walking like someone who has forgotten how feet work and is relearning from memory. Webb calls over to the medical officer on duty. "Doc, check this one first." The medical tent smells like iodine and coffee. There are 4 other prisoners waiting for examination, standard protocol. Every POW gets a full screening within 48 hours of arrival. Typhus, tuberculosis, dysentery, anything contagious gets isolated immediately. Werner sits at the end of the bench. His boots are still laced, German army issue, leather once black, now grey with age and salt stains. The laces are frayed, knotted in places. He has not untied them in 11 days. Dr. Thornton Caldwell enters the tent carrying a clipboard and a cup of coffee that has gone cold. He is 41 years old, from Boston originally, trained at Johns Hopkins, drafted in 1943. He has been running the medical unit at Camp Hearn for 7 months. He is good at his job, efficient, professional. He does not waste time on pleasantries with prisoners, not because he dislikes them, but because there are too many and not enough hours. But when he gets to Werner, something makes him stop. The smell is stronger here, close. It is not coming from the boy's clothes or his hair. It is coming from his feet. Caldwell sets down his clipboard, kneels in front of the bench, looks up at Werner, and asks in careful, slow English, "Can you understand me?" Werner does not respond. His eyes are fixed on some point in the middle distance, seeing nothing. The translator, a German-American corporal named Fischer, steps forward. Repeats the question in German. Werner blinks, nods once. "I need to remove your boots," Caldwell says through Fischer. "Can you untie them?" Werner looks down at his feet as if he is seeing them for the first time. He reaches for the laces. His hands shake, not from cold, not from fear, from something else. Something Caldwell will understand only later. Werner's fingers fumble with the knots. He pulls at them, tugs. But the leather is stiff and his hands are not working properly. Caldwell waves him off. "It's all right, I'll do it." He takes a pair of surgical scissors from his kit, begins to cut through the laces. The leather resists at first, then gives. The first boot comes free with a wet, sucking sound, and the smell explodes into the tent like a physical thing. Caldwell pulls back instinctively, covers his mouth. Fischer gags and steps away. One of the other prisoners on the bench turns his head and vomits onto the floor. Caldwell has treated battlefield injuries. Shrapnel wounds gone septic. Burns that stripped skin down to bone. He has smelled gangrene, he has smelled infection. But this is different. This is not the smell of a wound. This is the smell of a body eating itself from the inside out. He forces himself to look. Werner's left foot is swollen to nearly twice its normal size. The skin is mottled. Dark purple in some areas, pale grey in others. Around the toes, the tissue has turned black. Completely black. The colour of charcoal. When Caldwell touches the skin lightly with a gloved finger, there is no reaction, no flinch, no pain, response. That is the most alarming sign of all. Pain means living nerves. No pain means the tissue is already dead. Caldwell looks up at Werner. The boy is staring straight ahead, face blank, eyes dry. "How long?" Caldwell asks through Fischer. Werner does not answer immediately. He thinks about it, as if calculating something. "Since the march," he says, finally. His voice is quiet, flat. The voice of someone reporting a fact, not a catastrophe. "What march?" Caldwell asks. Werner blinks. "The march from Bastogne." Caldwell cuts the second boot, free. The right foot is in even worse condition. The sock underneath has fused to the skin in places. When Caldwell tries to peel it away, layers of dead tissue come with it. He sets the scissors down, looks at Fischer. "Tell him he needs to go to the hospital now. Tell him we're going to try to save his feet, but I need to know everything. Where he was, how long he walked, what happened." Fischer translates. Werner nods, and then he says something that makes both men stop. "My mother told me the Americans would torture me to death. She said you were devils." There is no anger in his voice, no accusation, just a simple statement of fact. Caldwell stares at him, stares at the feet that are dying inside boots. This boy never took off because he believed stopping meant death. "Tell him," Caldwell says quietly, "that we don't torture prisoners. Tell him we're going to help him. and tell him I need to know what the hell happened to his feet. What happened began 3 weeks earlier, in Belgium, in snow, in cold that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground. Werner was part of a Wehrmacht unit defending the perimeter around Bastogne during the Ardennes offensive. Hitler's last gamble, the final desperate push to split the Allied armies and force a negotiated peace. It failed. By early January, the offensive had collapsed. Tens of thousands of German soldiers were surrounded, cut off, forced to surrender or die. Werner's unit surrendered on January 2nd. They were searched, disarmed, grouped into columns of 800 men each and told they would be marching to a collection point where trucks would transport them to the coast. The march was supposed to take 3 days, 30 miles across relatively flat terrain. It took 11 days, and the terrain was not flat, and the weather was not cooperative. January 1945 was one of the coldest winters on record in Europe. Temperatures dropped to 10 degrees Fahrenheit at night, sometimes lower. Snow covered the ground in drifts that came up to a man's knees. The column Werner was in moved slowly. The guards were American infantry exhausted from weeks of fighting, short on supplies, following orders to keep the prisoners moving. Each prisoner received 1 meal a day, a tin of cold rations or a piece of bread. Water came from snow melted in canteens. Werner walked in the middle of the column. Next to him was a man named Klaus Müller, 45 years old, a factory worker from Leipzig before the war, conscripted in 1943. Too old for combat, but sent anyway because Germany was running out of young men. Klaus had a bad leg, an old injury from a machine accident years before the war. It ached in the cold, slowed him down, made every step a negotiation with pain. On the first night, when the column stopped in an open field with no shelter, the guards distributed blankets. There were not enough. 1 blanket for every 3 men. Werner and Klaus shared with a third prisoner, a boy even younger than Werner, who would not survive the march. On the second night, Klaus was shivering so badly he could not sleep. Werner took off his own blanket and draped it over the older man. Klaus protested. Werner ignored him. That decision, that single act of kindness, saved Klaus's life for 9 more days. And it doomed Werner's feet. By the 3rd day, Werner's toes had gone numb. He thought it was normal. Everyone's feet were cold. The numbness would pass when they reached shelter. It did not pass. By the 5th day, the numbness had spread to his entire foot. He could still walk, could still put weight on it, but he could not feel the ground beneath him. He did not tell anyone. Complaining meant being put on a truck, if a truck was available. If not, it meant being left at an aid station with no guarantee of food or medical care. Werner had heard stories. Prisoners who could not keep up were sometimes left in barns or empty houses with minimal supplies. Some were picked up later, some were not. He was more afraid of being left behind than he was of losing his feet. So he walked, stuffed dry grass into his boots to create insulation, tied strips of cloth around the outside to keep the snow from seeping in, and he kept walking. On the 7th day, the pain began, not in his feet, in his calves, in his knees, his body compensating for the loss of feeling below. He walked differently now, mechanically, like a man on stilts. On the 9th day, a bridge was destroyed by German artillery. The column had to detour, add another 20 miles to the route. On the 10th day, a blizzard hit. The column stopped for 2 full days in an open field. No shelter, no fire. The guards did what they could, but they were as cold and exhausted as the prisoners. Werner sat with his back against Klaus, sharing body heat, watching the snow pile up around them. Klaus was coughing, deep wet coughs that shook his entire frame. Pneumonia. Werner knew it. The guards knew it. There was nothing to be done. On the 11th day, the column started moving again. Klaus could barely stand. Werner helped him up, put Klaus's arm over his shoulder, half-carried him for 3 miles. Then Klaus collapsed. The guards put him on a supply truck. Werner watched him go. Klaus raised one hand, a small wave. The last gesture Werner would ever see him make. The truck drove away. Klaus Müller died 4 hours later. pneumonia and exhaustion, and a body that had simply run out of reasons to keep going. Werner did not know this yet. He would not know for another week. But something in him knew, some quiet certainty, that the man who had become like a father to him was gone. And Werner kept walking. He walked until his feet were no longer feet, until they were dead weight at the end of his legs, until every step was an act of will disconnected from sensation. He walked until the column reached a railhead where trucks were waiting. He climbed onto the truck without assistance, rode for 6 hours to a port, transferred to a ship, crossed the Atlantic, transferred to another truck, and arrived at Camp Hearn, Texas on a warm January afternoon with feet that were already dying inside his boots. Now sitting on a bench in a medical tent staring at a doctor who is staring at his feet with something close to horror, Werner understands that the walking is over. The question is whether he will ever walk again, or if the march that saved him from being left behind will be the thing that cripples him for life. Dr. Thornton Caldwell stands in the examination room staring at Werner Steiner's feet and trying to calculate how much of this boy he can save. The room is small, white walls, a single window facing east. Morning light comes through at an angle that makes everything look clinical and cold. There is a metal table, a tray of instruments, a scale that has weighed hundreds of prisoners in various states of destruction. Werner sits on the examination table. His feet hang over the edge. Both are unwrapped now, exposed to air for the first time in 11 days. The smell has settled into the room like fog. Caldwell has called in 2 other doctors. Captain Morris, a surgeon. Lieutenant Vance, a specialist in frostbite and cold weather injuries. They stand in a semicircle around Werner's feet, speaking in low voices as if the feet themselves might overhear. Full thickness necrosis, Vance says. He touches the blackened tissue of Werner's left big toe with a gloved finger. No response. All 10 toes, possibly extending into the metatarsals. Morris nods. The smell indicates anaerobic bacteria, likely Clostridium. If that spreads into the bloodstream, it won't, Caldwell interrupts, because we're operating today. Morris looks at him. Amputation. Debridement first, aggressive, remove everything that's already dead, see what we can save. And if there's nothing to save... Caldwell is quiet for a moment. Then he says, then we amputate at the ankle, both feet, but not before we try. Morris raises an eyebrow. He's a prisoner. He's a patient, Caldwell says. The words come out harder than he intended. On this table, he's a patient, nothing else. There is a beat of silence. Morris nods slowly. Your call, doctor. Caldwell turns to Werner. The boy is watching them with those grey, empty eyes, understanding nothing, expecting nothing. Through the translator, Caldwell explains what is about to happen. Surgery, removal of dead tissue, pain, a lot of pain. The possibility that they might have to remove both feet entirely if the infection has spread too far. Werner listens, does not react. When the translator finishes, Werner asks a single question in German. He wants to know. Fischer translates, why you don't just cut them off now. He says he's only a prisoner. He says, you could save time. Caldwell stares at Werner. This boy, who walked 11 days on dying feet because he was more afraid of being left behind than of losing the ability to walk. This boy who gave away his blanket and sacrificed his own body to keep an older man warm for 9 more days. Tell him, Caldwell says slowly, that on my operating table there is no such thing as only a prisoner. Tell him we're going to try to save his feet. And tell him it's going to hurt like hell, but if he can survive what he's already survived, he can survive this. Fischer translates. Werner nods once, a small mechanical movement, then he says something else. Fischer hesitates before translating. He says, his mother told him Americans were devils. He wants to know why a devil would try to save his feet. Caldwell feels something tighten in his chest. He thinks about all the propaganda both sides have been fed. All the lies told to make young men willing to kill each other. Tell him, Caldwell says that his mother was wrong. Tell him we're just doctors, and doctors fix what's broken. The surgery begins at 1400 hours. Werner is placed on his stomach on the operating table. His feet extend over the edge. Caldwell cannot use full anesthesia. He needs Werner conscious, needs him able to respond to pain. Pain is the only reliable indicator of where living tissue ends and dead tissue begins. They inject lidocaine around both ankles, nerve blocks. It will numb some of the pain, but not all of it, not even close. A nurse gives Werner a leather strap. He bites down on it, grips the sides of the table with both hands. Caldwell picks up a scalpel. "Beginning debridement," he says for the record. A nurse writes down the time, 1407 minutes. The first cut into Werner's left foot produces no reaction. The tissue is completely dead, black, firm. It comes away in strips like old shoe leather. Caldwell cuts deeper, removes the entire big toe, then the second toe, the third. Werner does not move, does not make a sound. It is only when Caldwell reaches the fourth toe, cutting into the tissue at the base, that Werner's entire body goes rigid. A muffled sound comes from behind the leather strap, not quite a scream, something between a scream and a groan. "There," Caldwell says, "that's the line." He works carefully now, cutting away dead tissue, leaving anything that produces a pain response. It is delicate work. The boundary between living and dead is not clean, not clear. It is a gradient of grey tissue that might survive or might not. The fourth toe is partially alive. Caldwell removes the dead portion, leaves the base. The fifth toe is completely gone. He moves to the right foot. Same process, same careful excavation of dead flesh. Werner's breathing has gone ragged, fast and shallow. The nurse standing beside him wipes sweat from his face every few minutes, speaks to him in soft German, words that mean nothing but sound like comfort. 1 hour passes, then 90 minutes. By the time Caldwell finishes, Werner has lost all 10 toes, the front third of both feet. What remains is raw exposed tissue, muscle, bone, everything that should be hidden beneath skin, now open to air. Caldwell flushes the wounds with saline, applies sulfanilamide powder, the closest thing they have to antibiotics, wraps both feet in gauze soaked with more sulfur drugs. Werner has not screamed, has not begged them to stop. He has bitten through the leather strap in 3 places. His hands have left indentations in the metal table, but he has not made a sound louder than a groan. When it is over, Caldwell stands back, looks at what he has done, what he has saved. "Get him to isolation," he tells the nurses. "IV fluids, monitor for fever every 2 hours. If his temperature goes above 101, I want to know immediately." They lift Werner onto a gurney. His eyes are open but unfocused. Shock, pain, exhaustion, all of it layered together into something that looks like death, but is actually the beginning of survival. As they wheel him out, Werner turns his head slightly, looks at Caldwell, says something in German. Fischer, who has stayed for the entire surgery, translates. He says thank you. Caldwell nods, does not trust himself to speak. When the door closes, he stands alone in the operating room, blood on his gloves, the smell of necrotic tissue still hanging in the air. Captain Morris appears in the doorway. "You saved them." "Maybe," Caldwell says. "Ask me again in 3 days. If he doesn't develop sepsis, then I saved them. And if he does, then we amputate at the ankle and he spends the rest of his life on prosthetics." Caldwell strips off his gloves, drops them in the waste bin. "But at least we tried." Morris is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "You know the review board is going to ask why you spent 2 hours on a POW when we have American soldiers waiting for surgery." "Let them ask," Caldwell says. "I'll tell them the same thing I'd tell anyone. A patient is a patient. The uniform doesn't matter once they're on my table." He walks out, leaves Morris standing in the doorway, leaves behind the operating room that smells like death and looks like a butcher shop. But somewhere in the camp hospital, in a small isolation room, Werner Steiner's heart is still beating. His feet are still attached to his body, and against all reasonable odds, he is still alive. The fever comes on the second night. Werner's temperature climbs to 100.4, then 100.6. By midnight, it hits 100.9. The nurses pack him in ice, change his dressings every hour, watch for signs of sepsis, the red streaks that would indicate infection spreading into his bloodstream, the confusion that would mean his brain was shutting down. Caldwell sits in a chair beside Werner's bed, watches the thermometer, watches the boy's breathing. If the fever breaks, Werner lives. If it spikes to 103 or higher, they operate again. Take both feet. Burn the stumps with silver nitrate to cauterize the infection. Werner shivers under the thin blanket, delirious, speaking in German, calling out for someone. Fischer, who has been sleeping on a cot in the corner, wakes up, listens. He's calling for Klaus, Fischer says quietly. Over and over, Klaus, Klaus. Who's Klaus? Caldwell asks. The older man, from his unit, the one who died on the truck. Caldwell says nothing, just sits, watches, waits. At 0300 hours, Werner's temperature is 101.8. At 0400 it is 101.2. At 0530 it is 100.1. At 0700, when the sun comes up and light floods through the window of the isolation room, Werner's fever breaks. His temperature drops to 99.4, then 99 even. By noon, it is 98.8, normal. Caldwell checks the wound dressings, no red streaks, no pus. The tissue at the edges of the wounds has begun to granulate. New cells forming, pink and raw, but alive. He's going to make it, Caldwell says. The nurse nods. Want me to increase his rations? Yes, and tell the kitchen I want him on full meals starting tomorrow. He needs protein, calories, everything. The nurse makes a note, leaves. Caldwell sits back down in the chair. Werner is awake now, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. You're going to be okay, Caldwell says through Fischer. The infection is under control. Your feet are healing. Werner turns his head slowly, looks at Caldwell, and then he asks the question that will change everything. Why one word? But it carries the weight of every propaganda poster Werner has ever seen, every speech he has heard, every story his mother told him about American devils who torture prisoners and leave them to die. Caldwell thinks about how to answer, thinks about Geneva Conventions and medical ethics and all the official reasons. But what he says is simpler. Because you're 19 years old, and you walked 11 days on feet that were dying because you were too afraid to stop. And that kind of courage doesn't deserve to end on an operating table in Texas. Fischer translates. Werner stares at him. Something shifts in those grey eyes. Not quite tears, not quite belief, but something, a crack in the wall. 7 days after the surgery, Werner takes his first meal in the main canteen. He is wheeled there on a chair. His feet are still wrapped, still healing, but he is out of isolation, out of immediate danger, strong enough to sit upright for more than a few minutes. The canteen is a long wooden building, tables arranged in rows, windows on both sides. It smells like coffee and bacon and industrial soap. There are other prisoners here, some eating, some playing cards, some just sitting, staring at nothing the way men do when they have survived something they did not expect to survive. A nurse wheels Werner to a table near the window, brings him a tray. Werner looks down at the tray, and everything he thought he understood about the world stops making sense. There are 4 strips of bacon, thick cut, cooked until the edges curl and crisp, still glistening with rendered fat. 2 eggs, fried, the yolks intact and bright yellow. 2 slices of toast, buttered, the butter melting into the bread. A cup of coffee, black, steam rising. Werner stares, does not move, does not touch the food. The nurse says something in English. Fischer, who is nearby, translates. She says you should eat. You need the protein. Werner picks up the fork. His hand is shaking. He cuts a small piece from the first strip of bacon, lifts it to his mouth. The smell hits him first. Salt, smoke, the deep, rich aroma of pork fat that has been cured and aged and cooked slowly, until the sugars caramelize and the proteins break down into something that smells like every warm kitchen, every safe home, every morning that did not involve war. He puts the bacon in his mouth, and the world stops. The texture is unlike anything he has tasted in years. It is crispy on the outside, the kind of crispy that shatters between teeth, but underneath the fat is soft, melting, coating his tongue like warm silk. The taste comes in layers. Salt first, immediate, sharp. The kind of salt that makes your mouth water and your brain light up with recognition of something essential. Then fat, rich, profound, the kind of fat that fills every corner of your mouth and makes you forget that food is supposed to be fuel and reminds you that food is supposed to be pleasure. And underneath all of that subtle but present a hint of sweetness, the caramelization of sugars, the maple or brown sugar used in the cure. It balances the salt and the fat and creates something that is not quite savory and not quite sweet, but perfectly, impossibly good. Werner closes his eyes. For a moment there is no war, no camp, no dead feet, no dead Klaus. There is only bacon. He chews slowly, swallows. The fat coats his throat. Warm, comforting. He takes another piece. This time he notices more. The way the crispy edges give way to softer center. The way the salt makes him want water and fat at the same time. The way his entire body seems to wake up cell by cell as nutrients he has not had in months flood into his system. He eats the second strip, then the third, and then he stops. Because something else is happening. A feeling rising in his chest that is not hunger and not satisfaction, but something darker. Guilt. He looks down at the fourth strip of bacon, at the eggs, at the toast with butter melting into golden pools, and he thinks about Klaus. Klaus, who never tasted bacon, who grew up in a factory town eating potatoes and cabbage and whatever scraps could be stretched across a week, who joined the army and ate field rations that tasted like cardboard and mud, who died on a truck in Belgium with pneumonia in his lungs and cold in his bones and no bacon anywhere. Werner thinks about his mother who is somewhere in Germany, probably Leipzig, probably in the basement of their apartment building hiding from bombs, eating whatever can be scavenged, bark from trees if the stories are true, grass, flour mixed with sawdust to make it last longer, his mother who told him that Americans were devils, his mother who is starving while he, her son, a prisoner of war, a sworn enemy of the United States, sits in a warm canteen in Texas eating bacon that tastes like heaven. The guilt is not subtle, it is not quiet, it is a physical thing. A weight in his stomach, a pressure in his chest. Werner sets down his fork. He has eaten 3 strips of bacon, 3 perfect strips that probably cost more than his mother spends on food in a week. And he cannot eat anymore, not because he is full, but because every bite tastes like betrayal. A nurse notices, comes over, asks if something is wrong with the food. Fischer translates. Werner shakes his head, says something in German. Quiet, almost inaudible. Fischer hesitates, then translates. He says his friend Klaus never got to eat bacon. He says his mother is eating bark. He says he is the enemy and we are feeding him like a king, and he does not understand why. The nurse does not know what to say. She pats Werner's shoulder awkwardly, walks away. Werner sits alone at the table. The 4th strip of bacon cooling on the plate. The eggs congealing. The toast going cold. And, for the first time since Klaus died, Werner cries. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears running down his face while he stares at a piece of bacon he cannot bring himself to eat, because he has finally understood something. His mother was wrong. The Americans are not devils, they are not monsters, they are people who follow rules, who treat prisoners with a decency that Werner's own army did not show to its enemies, who spend 2 hours saving the feet of a 19-year-old enemy soldier because the Geneva Convention says they must. And that realization is more devastating than any propaganda could ever be. Because if his mother was wrong about the Americans, what else was she wrong about? If the people he was taught to hate are the people saving his life, what does that mean about everything he believed? If the enemy is feeding him bacon, while his own people starve, what does that make him? Werner does not have answers. All he has is guilt and confusion and a plate of food he cannot finish. He sits in the canteen until the lunch period ends, until the other prisoners file out, until a nurse comes to wheel him back to his room. As they pass through the door, Werner looks back at the table. The fourth strip of bacon is still there, uneaten, a monument to everything he has lost and everything he is trying to understand. Over the next 3 weeks, Werner begins to see the camp differently. Not as a prisoner seeing a prison, but as a human being seeing other human beings trying to do their jobs within a system that is designed, however imperfectly, to preserve dignity. He sees guards playing baseball with prisoners during recreation time, sees German POWs laughing as they run bases, sees American soldiers teaching them the rules, correcting their form, treating them like teammates instead of enemies. He sees the Red Cross deliveries, boxes of supplies marked with neutral insignia, chocolate, cigarettes, playing cards, books in German, all distributed to prisoners without favoritism or cruelty. He sees the infirmary where German prisoners and American soldiers are treated in adjacent beds, sees doctors moving between them without distinction, sees nurses calling prisoners by their names, not their numbers. He sees Corporal Fischer, the translator, sitting with homesick prisoners and writing letters for them to send home, sees Fischer spending his own money on stamps, sees him staying late to make sure every letter gets properly addressed. And Werner begins to understand that everything he was told was a lie, not a small lie, not a distortion, a complete total fabrication. The Americans are not devils. They are farmers from Iowa and factory workers from Pennsylvania and college students from California who were drafted into a war they did not choose and are now trying to fight it with some measure of humanity intact. The propaganda collapse is not sudden. It does not happen all at once. It is a slow erosion, a daily chipping away at certainties. Every act of casual kindness is a hammer blow to the worldview Werner carried with him from Germany. Every moment of decency is proof that he was lied to. And the worst part, the part that keeps him awake at night, is that he does not know what to do with this knowledge. He cannot write to his mother and tell her she was wrong. The mail system does not allow prisoners to send political commentary. And even if it did, what would he say? Dear mother, the Americans are not torturing me. They are feeding me bacon and saving my feet and treating me better than our own army treated its soldiers. Everything you told me was a lie. He cannot say that, cannot write those words, so he says nothing. Writes bland letters about the weather in Texas, about how his feet are healing, about how he is safe, and keeps the bacon and the guilt and the realization locked inside. 6 weeks after the surgery, Werner's feet have healed enough for him to begin physical therapy. But there is a problem. The scar tissue has begun to contract, pulling the remaining tissue of his feet into unnatural positions. His toes are gone, yes, but now the balls of his feet are curling inward, the muscles and tendons tightening as they heal. It is called contracture. And if left untreated, it will lock Werner's feet into positions that make walking impossible. Caldwell explains this through Fischer, shows Werner diagrams, explains that he needs another surgery, smaller this time, to release the contracted tendons and reposition the bones. Werner refuses. No more, he says in halting English. He has been learning, picking up words from guards and nurses. No more surgery, no more pain. Caldwell tries to reason with him. Explains that without the surgery, Werner will need canes or crutches for the rest of his life. Explains that all the work they did to save his feet will be wasted. Werner does not care. He has had enough of operating tables, enough of pain, enough of being cut open. Caldwell makes a decision. He will not force Werner, but he will give him 1 week to reconsider. And during that week, he will assign someone to show Werner exactly what his life will look like if the contractures are not corrected. Enter Sergeant Elwood Pritchard. Pritchard is 37 years old, from Oklahoma originally, joined the Army in 1940, landed at Normandy on D-Day +2, lost his left leg below the knee to a German mine 3 weeks later. He has been working at Camp Herne as a physical therapist since his discharge from active duty, teaching wounded soldiers how to walk again, how to use prosthetics, how to live with bodies that will never be whole. He is good at his job, patient, firm when he needs to be, and utterly unsentimental about disability. Caldwell brings him to Werner's room, explains the situation. Pritchard looks at Werner's feet, nods. "I can work with this." For the next week, Pritchard puts Werner through a series of exercises designed to show him exactly what his life will be like if he refuses the surgery. Walking upstairs, Werner makes it 3 steps before his feet cramp and he nearly falls. Standing for extended periods, Werner lasts 12 minutes before the pain in his arches becomes unbearable. Crouching down to pick something up and standing back up, Werner cannot do it. His feet will not flex properly. He tips forward, catches himself on a chair. Running, impossible. Even trying results in Werner falling within 2 steps. Pritchard does not lecture, does not explain, just demonstrates. "This is your life," he says simply. "If you don't fix the feet, this is what you get." On the 5th day, Pritchard shows Werner his own prosthetic. "Lost it at Normandy," Pritchard says. "German mine. Took my leg at the knee. You know what I'd give to have the choice you have, to have a real foot, even a damaged one, that could be fixed with 1 more surgery." He taps the prosthetic, makes a hollow sound. "This works. I can walk, I can run, sort of. I can do my job. But it's not a foot. It's a tool. And every day I wake up and I feel the leg that's not there. Phantom pain, they call it. And my brain still thinks the leg exists, still sends pain signals to a foot that's been buried in France for 2 years. Wow, he looks at Werner. "You've got feet, real ones. Damaged, yes, but real. And you can fix them. 1 more surgery, 90 minutes, and you walk normal for the rest of your life." Werner is quiet for a long time. Then he asks in careful English, "It will work?" "Can't guarantee it," Pritchard says honestly. "Surgery never comes with guarantees, but I've seen Caldwell work. He's good, best I've seen. If he says he can fix your feet, I believe him." Werner thinks about Klaus, about walking 11 days to avoid being left behind, about surviving when he should have died. "Okay," he says finally. "I do surgery," Pritchard nods. "Smart choice." He holds out his hand. Werner shakes it. And somewhere in that handshake is an understanding. 1 broken soldier to another. 1 man who lost a limb to war and 1 man who almost did. Neither of them chosen this, neither of them asked for it, but both of them in their own ways refusing to let it be the end. The second surgery happens on May 4th, 1945, 3 days before Germany surrenders. Werner does not know this yet. News from Europe is filtered through official channels. Prisoners are told only what the camp commander decides they need to know. But the guards know, and there is a tension in the air, an anticipation. The war is ending. The second surgery takes 90 minutes. Caldwell cuts through the scar tissue, repositions the tendons, inserts temporary pins to hold the bones in the correct alignment while they heal. Werner will need to wear casts for 6 weeks, then custom shoes for the rest of his life. But if the surgery works, he will walk without canes, without crutches, without limping. When Werner wakes up from the anesthesia, his feet are in plaster casts. White, heavy, but somehow less frightening than the exposed wounds were. "It went well," Caldwell tells him. "Now you just need to heal." Werner nods, falls back asleep. He sleeps through the night of May 7th, sleeps through the morning of May 8th, wakes in the afternoon to the sound of shouting outside. Not angry shouting, celebration. He asks a nurse what is happening. She smiles. "The war's over. Germany surrendered this morning." Werner stares at her, trying to process this. The war is over. The war that took Klaus, that took his mother, that took his feet and his faith and everything he thought he understood. Over. He should feel relief, joy, something, but all he feels is empty. That night a letter arrives from the Red Cross. It has been sitting in a processing center for 3 months, working its way through the system. Fischer brings it to Werner's room. Translates the official German. Werner's mother is dead. Killed in the firebombing of Dresden. February 13th, 1945. The same week, Werner was eating bacon in the canteen. The same week, he was crying over the guilt of eating well while his mother starved. She was already dead. Had been dead for 3 months. Had been dead while he worried about betraying her by accepting American kindness. Werner does not cry, does not speak. He just lies in the bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about bacon he could not eat, about a mother who died believing her son would be tortured by devils, about Klaus who saved his life by dying first. And he makes a decision. When Fischer asks if Werner wants to apply for repatriation to return to Germany, now that the war is over, Werner shakes his head. No, he says, I stay here. You have family in Germany? Fischer asks. No, Werner says. No family, no home, nothing to go back to. Fischer nods, understands. I'll put you on the list for displaced persons, refugee status. You can stay in the US if someone sponsors you. Werner nods. He will stay in the country that his mother called hell. Will build a life in the place he was taught to fear, because there is nothing left in Germany but ashes and lies. And in Texas, despite everything people tried to save him, that has to mean something, even if he does not yet know what. August 1945, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The train pulls into the station at 4 in the afternoon. Steam hisses from the engine. The platform is crowded with people meeting arrivals, soldiers coming home, families reuniting. The war is over, and the world is trying to remember how to be normal again. Werner Steiner steps off the train wearing donated clothes, grey trousers, a white shirt, a brown jacket too large in the shoulders. On his feet are the custom shoes made by Friedrich, a German prisoner who had been a cobbler. The shoes are ugly, thick-soled, heels built up 2 inches, leather stiff and new, but they work. Werner walks down the platform without canes, without crutches. His gait is not normal, will never be normal, but he walks. Waiting at the end of the platform is a family, Martin and Ruth Zimmermann, German-Americans, 3rd generation. Their son Thomas died at Anzio in 1944, 22 years old, killed by German artillery. Sponsoring a 19-year-old German boy feels like a way to balance the ledger. To turn death into life, to make absence mean something other than emptiness. Welcome, Martin says in accented German. Welcome to Lancaster, Werner nods. Thank you. They drive to a small house on the edge of town. The guest room has been prepared. A bed, a dresser, a window overlooking an oak tree. You'll work with me, Martin says. In the shop, learning furniture? Werner nods. Yes, I learn. That night, Ruth serves pot roast. Potatoes, carrots, bread, no bacon. Werner is grateful for that. He does not know if he could eat bacon again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. After dinner alone in the guest room, Werner unpacks his small bag from Texas. Inside are 3 things: the journal, leather-bound, half full with entries in German, a photograph, Klaus Müller, smiling, wearing civilian clothes, looking like someone's father, which he was, and a letter from Dr. Caldwell, written on U.S. Army Medical Corps stationery. Werner, you survived because you were stronger than your injuries, but you will need help for the rest of your life. These shoes, these feet, they will ache in winter, they will cramp if you stand too long. You will never run, you will never dance, but you will walk. And walking is enough. It has to be enough because you earned it. Every step. T.C. Werner folds the letter carefully, places it in the journal, places the photograph beside it. He will not forget, will not pretend the past did not happen, but he will not let it consume him either. He will walk forward, because walking forward is all that is left. The years pass. Werner works in Martin's furniture shop, learning to cut wood, to sand, to join pieces together with precision. His feet ache, especially in winter, especially after long hours standing, but he does not complain. By 1949, Martin makes him a partner. 25% ownership. Werner tries to refuse. Martin insists. You earned it, with your hands, with your work. In 1951, Werner meets a woman, Helen Morris. She works at the bakery below his apartment. Plain-faced but kind, she has a laugh that sounds like water over stones. One morning, she asks about his shoes. They're unusual, custom-made. Werner nods. From the war, she waits, does not push, and Werner tells her not everything, but enough. The march, the feet, the surgery, the choice to stay in America. When he finishes, Helen is quiet for a moment. My brother died at Normandy, June 7th, day after D-Day. He was 20 years old. Werner looks at her, understanding something. I'm sorry, he says. Me too, she says, but the war is over. We survived, that has to mean something. They marry in 1952, small ceremony, Lutheran church. Martin and Ruth as witnesses. Helen's parents do not come. They do not approve of their daughter marrying a former enemy soldier. But Helen does not care. In 1955, they buy a small house, 2 bedrooms, a basement, a yard. In 1956, their first child is born, a son. They name him Thomas, after Martin and Ruth's son, after the boy who died so that Werner might have a place to land. In 1959, a daughter, Margaret. Werner is a quiet father, does not raise his voice, teaches his children to work with their hands, to be useful, to never waste food. He does not tell them about the war, does not explain why he limps in winter, does not talk about Klaus or his mother or the bacon he could not finish. Helen knows. But she does not press him. Every January, on the anniversary of the march, Werner fasts for 1 day. He tells Helen it is a religious observance. She does not question it. But it is not religious, it is memorial. 1 day without food. To remember 11 days with almost none. To remember Klaus, who died hungry. To remember his mother, who died in fire. In the living room, in a glass case Martin built for him, Werner keeps 3 things: the custom shoes from 1945. Too worn to use anymore. Replaced by newer versions as the years pass. But the originals preserved, the journal, now full, pages dense with German script, the photograph of Klaus. But there is something neighbors do not see. In Werner's bedroom closet, behind old coats and forgotten boxes, there is a second pair of shoes, identical to the ones in the glass case, also from 1945, also made by Friedrich. Werner ordered 2 pairs, 1 for display, 1 to keep hidden, too precious to show, too important to risk losing. He tells no one about the second pair, not even Helen. Some things are too private even for family. The years continue. Werner builds furniture, raises children, becomes a grandfather. His children grow. Thomas studies engineering at Penn State. Margaret becomes a teacher. Both marry, have children of their own. In 1978, Helen retires from the bakery. They travel a little, weekend trips, visiting grandchildren. Werner's feet hurt more now. Age compounding old injuries, he walks slower, uses a cane on bad days. But he walks. In 1987, Helen dies. Stroke. Quick. She is in the garden one moment, gone the next. Werner moves in with Thomas and his family after that. His own house, too empty. He brings the glass case with him, sets it up in the guest room. Thomas asks about it once. Werner says, "From the war." Thomas does not ask again. Werner lives quietly, helps around the house, watches his grandchildren grow, reads the newspaper, and every January he fasts. January 15th, 1998. Werner wakes up on the anniversary. 53 years since he arrived at Camp Herne with feet that were dying. He is 72 years old. His hair is white. His hands shake slightly. His feet ache constantly now. But he is alive. He goes downstairs. Thomas and his wife are already up. Coffee brewing. "Morning, Pop," Thomas says. Werner nods. Pours coffee. No food. Today is the day. Thomas knows better than to ask. Werner spends the day in his room, reading, writing a final entry in the journal. 53 years. I still do not know if I deserve to survive. Klaus did not. My mother did not. So many did not, but I did. Dr. Caldwell saved my feet. Sergeant Pritchard taught me to walk. Martin and Ruth gave me a home. Helen gave me a family. I have lived a life I was not supposed to have. I hope it was enough. I hope Klaus would think it was enough. He closes the journal, places it back in the glass case. That night he goes to sleep and does not wake up. Thomas finds him in the morning, peaceful. No pain, just an old man who had lived longer than he expected and finally ran out of time. The funeral is small. Family, a few neighbors, the pastor from the Lutheran church. Werner is buried beside Helen. The headstone is simple. Werner Steiner, 1926 to 1998, beloved husband, father, grandfather. No mention of the war, no mention of the march, no mention of the feet he almost lost. Just a name and dates and the relationships that mattered. 3 weeks after the funeral, Thomas begins sorting through his father's belongings. Clothes to donate, furniture to distribute among family, papers to file, and the glass case. Thomas takes it home, sets it up in his own guest room. The shoes, the journal, the photograph of Klaus. He does not read the journal, not yet. It feels like trespassing, but he keeps it, keeps all of it. 2 months later, the estate sale company calls. Mr. Steiner, we found something in your father's old house. In the bedroom closet, another pair of shoes, same style as the ones you kept. Do you want them? Thomas is confused. Another pair. Custom made, old, same build as the display pair. We found them behind some coats. Thomas drives to the house. The estate sale is in 3 days. Most items already tagged and priced. In the bedroom closet on a shelf sits a pair of shoes, identical to the ones in his guest room, same thick soles, same built-up heels, same shortened toes. Thomas picks them up, turns them over. Inside the right shoe, wedged beneath the insole, is something the estate sale company missed, a small notebook. Different from the journal, smaller, older. Thomas opens it. The first page is dated January the 15th, 1945. The handwriting is different, shakier, younger. I should have died. Klaus died instead of me. Every step I take is his step. Every year I live is his year. The Americans gave me bacon when my mother was eating bark. I do not know if I was saved or cursed. Thomas reads the entire notebook standing in his father's empty bedroom. It is not a duplicate of the main journal. It is something else. Earlier, rawer, written during the first months at Camp Herne, before Werner learned to bury his emotions, before he learned to be quiet about his pain. When Thomas finishes reading, he sits on the floor, back against the wall, learning for the first time who his father was before he became his father, learning about 11 days in snow, about bacon he could not finish, about propaganda that shattered like glass, learning about a boy who gave away his blanket and lost his toes and chose to live anyway. The estate sale company asks what to do with the shoes. Thomas almost says, keep them, almost takes them home. But something stops him. These shoes are not display pieces, they are the originals. The ones Werner actually wore off the train in 1945. The ones that carried him through the first steps of his new life. They do not belong in a guest room. They belong somewhere people will understand what they mean. List them, Thomas says. Table 17, $12. You sure? The estate sale manager asks. I'm sure, Thomas says, but call this number if anyone buys them. He writes down the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. Tell them these belong to a German POW. Tell them there's a story. October 1998. A researcher from the museum buys the shoes for $12. He is in Pennsylvania following a tip about POW artifacts, sees the shoes, recognizes the custom construction, buys them on instinct. When he finds the notebook inside, he calls his supervisor. 2 weeks later, Dr. Patricia Gaines calls Thomas. Mr. Steiner, we need to talk about your father's shoes. Thomas flies to New Orleans. The museum's archive room smells like old paper and preservation chemicals. Dr. Gaines spreads documents across a table. Werner's medical file from the National Archives. Complete, detailed, every surgery documented. The prisoner manifest from Camp Herne. Prisoner number 4112, Werner Steiner, age 19, captured Ardennes, arrived January the 12th, 1945. Everything in the notebook matches the official records, Dr. Gaines says, down to the dates, the doctors' names, the surgeries. It's all verifiable.
So, it's real, Thomas says. It's real. But there's something else. She pulls out a box, opens it carefully. We've been cataloguing Dr. Thornton Caldwell's estate. He died in 1987. His family donated his papers. This was in a folder labeled Unsent. Inside is a letter, unsealed, yellowed, addressed to Werner Steiner, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. No stamp, never mailed, dated 1975. Read it, Dr. Gaines says quietly. Thomas reads. Dear Werner, I do not know if you are still alive.
I do not know if this letter will ever reach you, but I have been thinking about you lately. It has been 30 years since I operated on your feet, 30 years since I made the decision to try to save them instead of amputating. I want you to know something. That decision changed my life. Not because the surgery was technically difficult, though it was, and not because you survived, though I am glad you did, but because that day, operating on a 19-year-old enemy soldier, I understood for the first time what it means to be a doctor. It means seeing past the uniform, past the flag, past the propaganda on both sides that tells us who is human and who is not. It means recognizing that underneath everything we use to divide ourselves, we are all just bodies, hearts, lungs, feet that can be saved or lost. You did not ask to be my patient. You were captured, forced to march until your feet died, brought to my camp by circumstance. But you taught me more than any professor at Johns Hopkins ever did. You taught me that medicine is not about choosing who deserves to be healed. It is about healing everyone who can be healed, because the alternative is barbarism. I went on to have a long career, operated on hundreds of patients, trained dozens of doctors, retired in 1972. But I never forgot you, never forgot the smell of your feet when I cut those boots off. Never forgot the way you bit through that leather strap without screaming. Never forgot the question you asked. Why would an American doctor spend 2 hours trying to save the feet of a German prisoner? I told you then because you were a patient. But the real answer is simpler. Because you were 19 years old, and you deserved a chance to live. I hope you got that chance. I hope you walked out of Camp Hearn and built a life somewhere. I hope you married, had children, grew old. I hope the feet I saved carried you through decades of ordinary days, waking up, going to work, coming home, because that is what it was all for. Not the surgery, not the recognition, not the medals or the ranks or the war, just the ordinary days, the walking, the living. Thank you for teaching me that. Sincerely, Dr. Thornton Caldwell. When Thomas finishes reading, he cannot speak. His hands shake. The letter trembles. He never knew, Thomas says finally. My father never knew Dr. Caldwell felt this way. No, Dr. Gaines says. Caldwell wrote this 30 years after the surgery and never sent it. We don't know why. Thomas looks at the letter, at his father's name in Caldwell's handwriting, at the words, "You taught me what it means to be a doctor." They saved each other, Thomas says. My father's feet, Dr. Caldwell's soul. They saved each other and never knew it. Dr. Gaines nods. That's exactly what happened, which is why we want to tell the story. We want to create an exhibit. Your father, Dr. Caldwell, the shoes, the journal, the letter, all of it. Thomas thinks about his father, who fasted every January and never explained why, who kept shoes in a glass case and never said what they meant, who lived 53 years carrying Klaus and his mother and 4 strips of bacon he could not finish. Yes, Thomas says. Let's tell the story. The exhibit opens on January 15th, 2000, 55 years to the day after Werner arrived at Camp Hearn. Prisoners of war humanity in the margins. The display case contains 5 items. The original shoes from 1945, leather, cracked and dark, heels built up, toes shortened. Werner's notebook, open to the first page. I should have died. Klaus died instead of me. The photograph of Klaus Müller, smiling. Frozen at 45 forever, Dr. Caldwell's letter framed, the words visible through glass. And one final item, a small bronze sculpture commissioned for the exhibit, 4 strips of bacon cast in metal, preserved forever. The plaque reads, "This represents the meal that changed everything, not the surgery, not the medicine, but 4 strips of bacon that forced a 19-year-old German soldier to confront the lies he had been told. That made him realize the enemy was human. That broke his faith, and in breaking it saved his life." While underneath, Werner Steiner walked 11 days on dying feet because he was afraid to stop. He lived 53 more years because Dr. Thornton Caldwell refused to give up on him. This is their story. This is what we owe each other, even in war, especially in war. Thomas attends the opening with his family, his children, Werner's grandchildren, great-grandchildren. They stand in front of the display case, looking at the shoes, the journal, the bacon, learning for the first time the full story of the quiet German man who fasted every January and never explained why. A reporter asks Thomas what he thinks his father would say if he could see this. He would say it was too much attention, that he did not do anything special, that he just survived, that Klaus was the hero, that Dr. Caldwell was the hero, not him. "But what do you think?" the reporter asks. Thomas looks at the shoes, imagines his father at 19. Feet dying, faith shattered, everything he believed proven false, and choosing, despite all of that, to keep walking. "I think surviving is enough. I think walking forward when everything tells you to stop is heroic. I think he earned every day he lived." The exhibit runs for 5 years, travels to 6 cities, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles, Berlin, Lancaster. Over 2 million people see it. And then something happens that no one expects. Letters start arriving at the museum. Hundreds of them, then thousands, from children of German POWs who never talked about the camps, from children of American doctors who never explained why they saved enemy soldiers, from children of the men who walked those marches and never spoke about what it cost them, all of them saying the same thing: "This was my father, he never told us, but now we understand." Thomas receives 47 letters, forwarded by the museum. He reads them all, each one a small window into someone else's silence, someone else's private war. But one letter is different. It arrives in March 2005, postmarked Leipzig, Germany. Thomas opens it. The handwriting is careful, the English imperfect, but clear. "Dear Mr. Steiner, my name is Greta Hoffmann. I am the granddaughter of Klaus Müller. I saw your father's exhibit when it came to Berlin last month. I stood in front of the photograph of my grandfather for 20 minutes, crying. We thought he died alone, forgotten, just another casualty in a senseless war. But now I know someone remembered him, someone gave away a blanket for him, someone carried him 3 miles when he could not walk, someone loved him enough that 53 years later his photograph was in a glass case in Pennsylvania. My grandmother died in 1978. She never knew what happened to Klaus. The Red Cross told us he died January 13th, 1945 on a transport truck. Pneumonia. That is all we knew. But your father knew more. Your father knew that Klaus was kind, that he had a bad leg, that he shivered so badly he could not sleep, that he coughed and someone sat with him and tried to keep him warm. Your father knew Klaus was loved. And because your father remembered, I can tell my children, your great-grandfather was not alone. Even at the end, even in the cold, someone was there. Thank you for sharing this story. Thank you for remembering Klaus. I am enclosing a photograph. It is Klaus with my grandmother and my mother. Taken in 1940 before the war. I want you to have it. So you can see what he looked like when he was happy, when he was home. Your father gave my grandfather 9 more days of life. And those 9 days meant my grandmother had closure, had a story to tell us. We are forever grateful. With deepest respect, Greta Hoffmann. Inside the envelope is a photograph. Klaus Müller, younger, smiling wider, arm around a woman. A small girl on his shoulders, looking like someone's husband, someone's father, which he was. Thomas frames both photographs, hangs them side by side in his study. Klaus before the war, Klaus during the war. The same man, different worlds. And in the middle, invisible, but present, Werner Steiner, who gave away a blanket and lost his toes and carried Klaus's memory for 53 years. Thomas writes back to Greta, tells her about Werner's fasting, about the glass case, about the quiet way his father honored the dead. They correspond for years, share stories, share photographs. Two families, two nations, two sides of a war, connected by 11 days in snow and a blanket given away and a boy who survived and remembered. In 2010, the museum closes the traveling exhibit. The artifacts return to permanent storage. But the story does not end. In 2015, a high school teacher in Lancaster uses Werner's story in her history class. Her students create a documentary. It wins a state award. In 2018, a medical school in Boston adds Caldwell's letter to its ethics curriculum. Required reading for first-year students. In 2022, Greta Hoffmann's grandson visits Lancaster, stands at Werner's grave, leaves a stone. A German tradition, a marker that someone was here, someone remembered. And in quiet moments in archive rooms and museum storage and family photo albums, Werner Steiner's shoes, weight, cracked leather, built-up heels, shortened toes, proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep walking when everything tells you to stop, even if your feet are dying, even if your faith is shattered, even if you do not know where the walking will lead. You walk anyway. Because walking is living, and living is enough. Werner Steiner walked 11 days through hell. And it took his toes, his balance, his ability to run or dance. But 4 strips of bacon took his certainties.
His faith in the lies, his belief that some people are human and others are not. And in the end, that second loss was the one that saved him. Because when everything you believe is proven false, you have 2 choices. You can cling to the lies and die with them, or you can let them go and learn to walk again. Werner chose to walk. And he walked slowly and painfully and without toes for 53 years, until his feet, damaged and scarred and held together by pins and scar tissue, finally gave out. And he stopped, not because he wanted to, but because he had walked far enough to earn a life, a family, a home, far enough to prove that Klaus's death meant something, far enough to show that Dr. Caldwell's choice to save instead of amputate was the right one, far enough to turn 11 days of hell into 53 years of ordinary life, which is all any of us are really walking toward. The ordinary days, the quiet moments, the morning coffee and the evening meal, and the grandchildren who ask questions we cannot answer. Werner Steiner walked through hell and came out the other side. And the boots that carried him are in a museum now, not as relics of war, not as monuments to suffering, but as reminders that the enemy is human, that bacon can change everything, that propaganda shatters when faced with kindness. That doctors heal because healing is what separates us from barbarians, that sometimes being saved is harder than dying, but worth it, always worth it, every single step.